What if I told you the point of modern game design was to continuously underdeliver in order to create a new global standard where you pay for more but get less in the process? Because that's kind of the story we got going on here with Avowed, fellas, and like a broken septic tank, the sludge keeps flowing. The city workers are drunk, nobody knows how to work a wrench, and I'm getting pink eye talking about these games so often. There's a lot of copium going around right now when it comes to whether Avowed is the true Skyrim successor. And I can confidently say myself, after seeing much gameplay reviews and whatnot, that this brings me to the conclusion that Avowed is, without a shadow of the doubt, not the Skyrim predecessor we were hoping for. I mean, come on, look at this.
Oh.
Incredible world design on display, the way that the NPCs continuously remind you that they are indeed not actual living, breathing beings in this fantasy world, but they're just mannequins that are being pulled from the shadows by some developer with a septum piercing is truly astounding to see. And how does this keep on happening? In the glory days of gaming, we had stuff like GTA Vice City, where you could shoot someone dead in the street and people would rightfully run away in fear. But in Avowed, you can unload all of your guns onto an entire crowd of people, and they won't even as so much as react to it. But what do I know? After all, I'm just someone who plays video games to an unhealthy degree. Shame on me for expecting the things that we buy to meet our expectations. And we're not even asking for the moon and the stars. We can't even seem to get the bare minimum these days. Then this guy on Twitter said, if you were expecting Skyrim, then that is your fault. Obsidian said repeatedly that it is similar to the Outer Worlds. Don't knock a game because you're an idiot. So Avowed is like the Outer Worlds. Is it though? Let me check. Can you kill NPCs in Outer Worlds? It's been a long time. I don't actually remember. And yeah, you can, sure. In fact, you can kill all of the NPCs in Outer Worlds if you really want to. And here's some footage from Call Me Kevin. He made a video where he explicitly went around and killed every single person in the game. And I mean everybody. And look at that, when you kill people in the Outer Worlds, it even tells you that murder is illegal, and that your faction reputation is cooked if you kill people from certain factions. I mean, yeah, that checks out. So this Twitter user guy trying to own the chuds is just lying. Avowed is actually nothing like the Outer Worlds. And this is what I'm saying, you're paying more for less, fellas, and if you point it out, you're just a bad consumer, and now you need to be spanked for stepping out of line. G-Man Liz responded to this user and said this, we're not knocking a game because it's not Skyrim. We're knocking a game because it lacks basic RPG mechanics that have been around since the 90s. You would think someone with retro in their handle could understand that. Well, in this retro guy's defense, his username is totally not retro, so I guess he isn't as retro as he claims to be, but yeah, G-Man is right. Why are we celebrating these games that continue to underdeliver while costing us more? Like, did you know that if you want to buy Avowed right now, and okay, let's use a recent comparison so that it isn't unfair. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That just came out as well. People are playing it, and it is also not discounted yet, as of the making of this video anyway. And look at that. Avowed is $10 more than Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So you're telling me that you can buy a game that costs more than Kingdom Come 2, but lacks all the cool, interesting, reactive game elements that Kingdom Come 2, or Skyrim, or the Outer Worlds even has in this case. And at what point are we going to stop accepting the slop for what it is? I would have been fine with Avowed being like this if it wasn't a full-price game on Steam. Sure, yeah, it's on Game Pass, but I think genuinely this is why Avowed is the way that it is. Here, get into my time machine and let's go back in time, shall we? So Microsoft bought Obsidian in November 2018. The Outer Worlds came out in late 2019, so a year later. Yes, I'm very good at math. Obviously, this meant that the Outer Worlds was in development prior to Microsoft buying Obsidian outright, which meant that when the Outer Worlds came out officially, it still had the DNA and fear baked into it that it actually had to be good and perform well in order to make money and have Obsidian survive. Of course, you can fast forward to right now, and Avowed has been in development apparently for around 5 years. So that would mean that it started somewhere in 2020, which coincidentally is when a lot of the ESG weirdness started to seep its way into video games. Tie this as well that obviously, once Microsoft owned Obsidian, their future games would be coming day one to Game Pass, effectively removing the AAA price tag attached to it unless it came to Steam or PlayStation later on, or the Switch, I guess. Is The Outer Worlds on Switch? Let me check. Oh, it is. Okay, well, yeah, alright. Anyway, what I've been noticing is once Microsoft buys up a studio, their games immediately seem to dip in quality pretty much across the board. Suddenly, all of the ingenuity and quality of their games, they go from good to, this is good enough for Game Pass, I guess, instantly. Let's be real, guys. If Avowed released exactly as it was right now for full price on everything without the comfy, cushiony parachute of Microsoft to save Obsidian from financial oblivion, it would not be the game that it is today. I made this point like 2 years ago in another Xbox video, but unfortunately it keeps coming true. Which is that, if you ask me, if you want to see the true limits of mankind's ingenuity and spirit to be tested, you have to put the fear of God in them. It's sort of like gambling. It's pointless if there's nothing on the line, but the moment you slip a 20, and then you suddenly realize, oh, you got something to lose based on the outcome of that dice roll, your entire demeanor around that game, it suddenly changes. And it's just like game development too. Why do you think that Skyrim had to be a good game day one, or The Witcher 3, or Dark Souls even? The reason is simple. Because these developers were, to varying degrees, making a game knowing full well that if they didn't deliver the goods day one, that fear of God within them would outright kill their studio and take their jobs away in an instant. So the need for the product made to be good was paramount to the messaging or whatever else people want to have in their games these days, because if your game sucked, so too did your yearly income, because it would not exist anymore because you would get laid off, obviously. So looking at Obsidian about 10 or so years ago, it's a completely different developer to what it is now. Did you know that Fallout New Vegas, which Obsidian made, took them only a year and a half to make from start to finish? And that game has sold almost 12 million copies and reviewed well, and everybody and their dog loves that game. It's great. New Vegas was made in less than half the time it took Obsidian to make Avowed. Yet anyone can tell you that New Vegas is a far more reactive world where choices genuinely matter when you play that game. And yes, just like The Outer Worlds, which is basically Fallout in space, New Vegas and Outer Worlds allows you to kill NPCs without remorse. And then the world reacts to your decisions in believable ways. Like trying to kill you, because you enjoy shooting unarmed civilians in the head with a shotgun, for example. The point I'm trying to make here is that New Vegas, and Outer Worlds to an extent, were made when Obsidian had that fear of God, so to speak, that was doing somersaults in these devs' brains during the entirety of these games' development cycles. Because if New Vegas failed, Obsidian would have been quartered, thrown to the wolves, and they would basically be dead and not exist. So how come Avowed is this Fisher-Price baby RPG when Obsidian was known for stuff like KOTOR 2 and New Vegas? The simple answer is two things. One is that a lot of the core talent has already left Obsidian for other companies. For example, Chris Avellone, who wrote New Vegas, hasn't been with the studio for a long time now, and yeah, we can tell alright. Since every review from independent sources like SkillUp or Maddie Plays says that Avowed has some of the worst characters that Obsidian has ever created, and that it features plenty by-the-numbers story quests with very bland world building and just forgettable writing all around. Maddie Plays, especially in his review, said that even the companion quests are forgettable as well. And none of the companions, outside of Kai, who is voiced by the same guy who did Garrus in Mass Effect, comes off as anything close to interesting at the very least. The director of Avowed is Carrie Patel, who based on her LinkedIn, she has worked at Obsidian for almost 12 years, mostly as a writer. Before Obsidian, she didn't really work in games, and Avowed is her first game directing gig. I'm not going to attack her and say, oh, she's a woman and that's why it sucks. No. But it is weird how Carrie has worked on the Pillars of Eternity games, which Avowed shares that same universe, and she is also touted as a writer for that universe for years, yet the story and world of Avowed and the characters have been lambasted for not being very good and forgettable at best. So how does someone who is familiar with this world so much end up making something that is so forgettable from a writing perspective? This brings me to the second point of this equation, which is of course, Microsoft. Look, it's not just Obsidian, this also happened with Starfield 2. And that game was made by a far more legacy team over at Bethesda, with Todd Howard and his short self spearheading the project, like he did with Skyrim, Oblivion, and Fallout 3 and other stuff too. So it would be weird if this just happened once. But it seems that once Microsoft owns you, suddenly the future games from these developers, they just dip in quality, and it's very weird. And this is what I keep circling back to. Bethesda, Obsidian, and all the other devs that Microsoft now owns, they had to deal with the real tangible loss of employment and the destruction of their studios and their reputations, let's be real, if their games were not good enough and didn't sell enough copies. But because Microsoft is a trillion-dollar company that keeps these all afloat and in the grand scheme of things, their game division is still making nowhere near what their software does. It doesn't really hurt them much in the pockets. And thus, all of these studios and their games have become, for lack of a better term, Netflixed. They don't need to worry about meeting a certain quota or sales targets, because all of this just comes to Game Pass anyways. So sure, Avowed has forgettable characters and lame stories and lacks the same reactive world where your actions could quite literally erase people from the game if you wanted to do that. Because why waste dev time adding these things if you don't have to, because it's not like you're gonna get laid off anyway, right? Imagine we're looking at your job, whatever it is, I don't know what you do. But imagine that your job hinged on how much you sold, or your performance dictated if you were still employed. Now imagine that your same job, but now your company has so much money that they don't really care what you even do, and they've become very lax with you, hitting a certain target or sales or whatever. Would you try harder knowing that there's this safety net in place? Probably not, right? You would, frankly and understandably, become lazier and complacent because the fear of God I keep bringing up is no longer breathing down your neck anymore. Now, you don't care if your writing isn't very good. Hell, my girlfriend, she works in corporate. She tells me all the time how some people have admitted to her that at work they just use ChatGPT to write their reports for them. And these people just submit these forms and whatever to their bosses that they didn't even write themselves. And the bosses don't know, and they just kind of go and look over it and go, oh, yeah, that looks good to me, thanks. And then they just keep getting paid and they're still employed. And that's what I mean. When people don't have the fear as a motivator, they become complacent. It's like someone living at home with no job or ideas for the future. What does it matter as long as their needs are met anyways without doing anything? A little personal for this video, but when my dad died and I suddenly realized that I didn't have the safety net per se that I did when I was younger, if I could only tell you guys the fear of God that entered me when I realized in that very moment that there was no longer that safety net that I could fall back on like I used to. If I failed before, whatever, I could just rely on my dad. But now that I couldn't, I realized I needed to actually try and make something of myself. I had that fear creeping over me and it motivated me to push myself, and here I am doing YouTube now as you're watching this naked on my couch. To be honest with you guys, I kind of genuinely believe that if my dad was alive, I may not have started YouTube, and I'm being serious. Because I too, like Obsidian, or Bethesda I guess, grew complacent. I didn't have to try because all my needs were already met. But now I have to rely on me, not someone else, and it changes things for you. I'm much stronger now, sure, but that's what I mean. Obsidian and other devs no longer have the drive to deliver actual quality experiences because there's no reason to anymore. Now, if Game Pass were to die and Microsoft were to suddenly shift their business perspective and expectations of their studios to, listen guys, you no longer have the safety of Game Pass to keep your lights on, you now need to sell copies yourself or your studio dies, I guarantee you that you would see far better games coming out of not just Obsidian, but all of Microsoft's own studios across the board immediately, because then they would have that reality of failure, yet again breathing down their gooch, to perform better. So when people are surprised and go, why isn't Avowed as interesting story-wise as Knights of the Old Republic 2 or New Vegas? Why can't I shape the world in meaningful ways like I could in the Outer World? Why is everything just window dressing? Why is every companion the same morality-wise? It's cause they know that they don't have to deliver that to survive till next year, guys. Why do you think that From Software still delivers you great experiences despite their previous successes? because they gotta deliver or layoffs will happen. Unfortunately, there's some really bizarre stuff that has been found in-game with Avowed. Sile found this, and I mean, come on guys, look at this. This is from a book in Avowed that you can read, and it's weird how telling this is, and it reads, "To achieve true victory, one must target the youth. You will never convert the old guards too stubborn in their heathen ways, but the young, they are flexible, malleable, and if all else fails, easy targets, who you cannot make soldiers make victims and examples. When first asserting control over a population, a show of force is recommended. Kill the children and their parents will follow." Obviously, this is written from the perspective of a bad guy, but boy oh boy, to anyone with common sense and has lived through these past few years, this just kind of reads like a weird wokey woke weirdos manifesto on how to push their ideology. Target the children, because the old guard aren't as flexible, and if they don't listen, the children are now easy targets. It's kind of yikes how you can make a lot of real world parallels here with a lot of stuff going on with schools and how teachers, target kids with ideologies, especially of the rainbow variety. But if you ask me, that little excerpt here reads more like a maxed off moment for Obsidian's writers than anything else. Creepy, dude, but I wanted to point that out. But let's keep on moving. Then we have PC Gamer with their article. Avowed succeeds where Dragon Age the Veilguard failed. It actionized a beginner-friendly entry point to a long-running series that doesn't sacrifice its identity. I'll just say it, maybe don't compare any game to Veilguard in a positive light, because that's the last thing that you probably want to do. Actually, in SkillUp's review of Avowed, he says that the writing and characters reminded him a lot of Veilguard, which is, not a good thing. Basically, the reason why it's not good is because Veilguard's cast had pretty much zero friction between them. I hate the whole everyone is a good guy, we all get along, nobody's problematic in any way style of writing characters. Comparing Avowed or Veilguard's writing to something like, say, Baldur's Gate 3, where characters like Shadowheart and Lae'zel wanted to kill each other, is more in line with what I kind of want as a player. Because it's boring when every single character is just practically the same, I guess. And why are Western devs especially seemingly afraid of writing taboo characters anymore? Why must everything just be squeaky clean? For example, I hated Lucanus in Veilguard. The guy is an assassin with a demon inside of him, yet he comes across like HR pulled him into the office and made him sign a contract so that he couldn't be neither an assassin nor demonic when you learn or speak to him. He's what I would call safe edgy, in that he may look the part, but intrinsically he's being tied down by yellow tape because a lot of these new age characters in writing, they don't really want to challenge anyone's worldview because they don't want to get cancelled or make anybody upset. This PC Gamer article is pretty much just the writer slobbering all over Obsidian's corn on the cob, without criticizing much of anything with the game's writing. What I call Avowed or Veilguard's writing is, it's pretty much just being written for games journalists. Because it's the safest, most padded, let's not ruffle any feather style of writing characters and worlds. And it's very clear why people walk away from stuff like this, because it doesn't challenge you, nothing says anything, and in turn, it leaves no lasting impact. In Dragon Age Origins, you had Morrigan, a sexy woman who was a victim of her mother, and her need to use the young women that she has to keep herself young through magic, and her story was about body agency and the morality of using that magic within the world of Thetis. And you won't find something like that in Veilguard. The best you get is Davrin, whose entire personality is, I have a pet griffin. Did you know I have a pet griffin? Because I have a pet griffin. Dear game developers and writers, please start taking risks with your characters again. Because I can't sit through more of this made by committee ass writing where everybody is just squeaky clean like SpongeBob SquarePants. Then you got yet another PC Gamer article. Avowed's low frame rates but smooth feeling gameplay makes me wonder if we PC gamers worry too much about the numbers. Yes, we're now reaching copium levels where a journalist for a site called PC Gamer of all things is trying to state that the absolute dogwater state of Avowed at pre-release is totally fine and maybe bad frame rates and poor optimization is okay.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
They even post the frame rates and which optimizations they used, and look, I just gotta say, if the best thing you can say about Avowed is that, sure it runs like ass, but that's okay. What are we doing here, PC Gamer? Why is this acceptable to you guys at all? You should be blasting these games for delivering subpar performances, but it's obvious you don't because you don't want to sound mean. Which in turn, these sorts of botched performances weasel by, which means these future games can also, in theory, get away with it too. You ask me, we need to bring back shame when it comes to game performance. If your game runs like ass, which many reviews for Avowed have rightfully said, they need to be fixed, not celebrated. Why is the game industry so willing to praise mediocrity these days? 10 years ago, journalists would be curb stomping a game like Avowed into solid concrete for delivering the experiences that they do, but these days these writers are so coddled and refuse to speak critically so that they don't lose access. And let's be real, after all, having access is what they determine makes them journalists in the first place, and not what their actual expertise in writing or forming their own opinions are. I swear, dude, journalists, they should need to pay for the copies of the games that they review, because maybe if they actually spent their own money on these games, instead of just getting everything for free all the time, they could actually then give their real honest opinions on things. Of course, you're going to be less critical of something if it was given to you for free, but if you paid upwards of $90 Canadian for Avowed, my god, that's a lot of money, and then it ran like maple syrup, you would be way more pissed. God, I hate Access Media, dude. They've lost the plot so long ago, and it's always tiring to see these shills shilling despite the criticism. They're completely blind on purpose to issues just so they can keep on getting sent free slop. Speaking of getting sent free slop, we have Paris. This guy is tied to Kinda Funny and other publications. Who cares? Anyway. One of the worst gaming news outlets on the internet is Kinda Funny and the epitome of gaming shill access media. So Paris fits right in. But anyway, Paris said that Avowed is a 9.5 out of 10 game, even though he himself didn't even know what franchise Avowed is a part of when he spoke to the game's developers in person.
So real quick, so just from a story standpoint, not spoilers obviously, but so this exists in the Path of Exile universe. So this exists in the Path of Exile universe.
Wait, Pillars of Eternity.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say Path of Exile?
And here's more of what I mean. Savvy found this on Twitter, so credit to her, but as you can see here, Microsoft and Xbox, they sent Paris the collector's edition for Avowed prior to release, and the guy is constantly championing and praising Xbox as the best place to play.
So this exists in the Path of Exile universe.
Just consume product and then get excited for next.
How are you going to take the opinion of the epitome of a yes man seriously when it comes to what he thinks about a video game like this? It's just like that Cypher of Tier Lady, another activist who attacked CD Projekt Red for transphobic stuff, but suddenly, it's all good once they started sending her gifts. These people are all the same, man. It's sad to see. This is why I'm glad that YouTubers in general are replacing the access media journalists, even though people like me don't get access because I refuse to shill for any company, and I will say what I think, regardless of what they send me. I just hate how easy it is to buy goodwill in the games industry, man. You just send these people a free piece of plastic, or you just gotta buy them food, and then they will grovel at your feet and suck your toes. It's disgusting. The bar is so low, dude. This is why I feel like I need to make these godforsaken videos, because these gaming pressing weirdos have been running rampant for far too long, shilling for these companies. And then Ginger Prime has been tracking Avowed's early access numbers, and so far, they are looking good, fellas. People are wondering why many people are not buying early access to Avowed, shouldn't they? It's simple, man. Here's the reason. The game is going to be on Game Pass. It's made for that surface, like the rest of the slop before it. Why would you buy early access unless you're streaming it to an audience or something? There's really no other reason why. Like Vera Dark has been playing Avowed early, but I understand why. She bought the early access because she streams the game so people can see it in action. But if you're just wanting to play the game, just wait, dude. Save your money. There's no point. But I think what perplexes me the most is how games made by trillion-dollar corporations like the slop compared to games made by studios with a fraction of their budget. As this one user said about Avowed versus Kingdom Come 2, is this a game backed by a $3 trillion company? If you compare it to Kingdom Come 2, which cost just $40 million for its development, it's insane to me how much worse it is. I'm not joking when I say that most Xbox games feel like they lack something every time. This is expected from an indie RPG, not an RPG from a studio belonging to one of the biggest companies in the world. Again, it's because Microsoft doesn't care anymore. There's no reason to deliver quality experiences because Game Pass has diluted their brand to such a degree that the actual console itself is practically useless now. Why do you think there's reports stating that Sony is turning their PC release strategy around to focus more so on PlayStation only? Because when you devalue the reason for buying your platform, you make it less likely for people to buy into your ecosystem. It just is what it is. Nintendo has never budged when it comes to exclusivity, and the Switch is still flying off the shelves. Xbox is the complete opposite of what you should be doing if you want to have your own dominant platform. And clearly, due to what Microsoft has done, it is still paying off for them since it's reported in January 2025. Xbox has become the biggest publisher of games in the entire world, and they're making most of their money on PlayStation. While this is great for Microsoft, I am worried that this newfound strategy is going to be further emboldened not through quality releases, but sheer quantity instead. And while some may like that, I personally think I would rather see less being made that is great than an overabundance of product that is passable at best. Because if the quantity aspect is what ends up working more for Microsoft, then you can expect all of their studios to even more so no longer focus on the quality as much anymore. Instead, every game will just be fetch quest galore, made by committee writing and paper-thin characters instead. And at that point, we need to wonder if what we're buying into is a good idea or not in the long run. Obviously, the DEI slop train doesn't work for everyone. Dontnod, for example, that's another developer. They have lost 95% of their value in a couple of years. But they just kept releasing incredibly diverse games that people clearly don't want to buy, like Banishers. You probably haven't even heard of that game. I'm just worried that if Microsoft's business strategy keeps working like this, that Sony, and maybe even Nintendo, could follow suit. Why release one 9 out of 10 game when you can make 5, 6 out of 10 games and make more money in the process, you know what I mean? Of course, I think what Microsoft is doing to these studios is going to damage their integrity and creativity for the sake of profits. And I frankly do not want to see more by committee safe slop games being made in the future. I think it's a big reason why so many devs like the ex-Witcher guys left to start Rebel Wolves. Because so many of these AAA dev studios are constrained by what they can do. And when you tie in the ever-looming hatred of Gamergate as well, which they do try to combat with their wokey woke slop writing, eventually something needs to give in here at some point. I truly hope that Avowed and how it reacts to your choices does not become the gold standard going forward. Otherwise, we are frankly cooked as a player base if this is what becomes what these devs want to do in the future. I think Avowed will obviously find an audience for sure. I mean, it is on Game Pass. But it is what SkillUp said in his review, which is that Avowed is more like the game you play in the background while folding your laundry, or something that you would just play on mute while you listen to a podcast. Then say the game where you push everything to the side so that you can just indulge yourself and focus in on its world. And the fact that Kingdom Come 2 cost $40 million to make, and despite its jank at least gives you a world that reacts to you is, well, it's frankly pathetic. It makes you wonder what more talented dev studios could do if they were given the overbloated budgets of these less competent AAA studios. But maybe it's that same bloat and lack of restriction money-wise that leads to these experiences that feel meandering and lacking purpose in the first place. Or it could be, like I said in this video, and it's kind of the point of this video existing, is that the difference between a product like Kingdom Come 2 to say Avowed really is that the fear of God needs to make a comeback in the gaming industry hard, before everything just becomes made for Netflix quality instead of what players truly deserve. But what do you think? Let me know, subscribe, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.
So this exists in the Path of Exile universe.